Hey guys, so here we go. In the last module, last video, you would have seen me sort of talk more generally about the position paper and how to handle it, what to do. In this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about, well, my hair looks crazy. I'm going to talk about how to write the analysis of the source paragraph. Now, I must tell you, this paragraph is the most important paragraph of the position paper. Now, why is that, Mr. Crosby? Well, because of this right here. I bet you're impressed with that seamless edit. Because of what you're seeing on the screen right here, which is an example of the Alberta government rubric that is used to grade your position paper. What this rubric shows is something known as the line of doom. What I want you to understand is that if you score an L or a P in the analysis of the source criteria, which is your first paragraph, if you score an L or a P, you are handcuffed to no higher than an S in any other category, and I refer to this as the line of doom. So you want to make sure that your analysis of the source paragraph is done properly. It's done well. You're dotting your I's, you're crossing your T's, you're doing all the things that I tell you that you need to do. Look at that, another seamless edit. So on your screen now, you have a checklist, right? And I'm including this in the modules about how to write the position paper for you, so you can refer to this as you're writing it, before you're writing it, anytime you want to use it. Please use it. Now, at the top, we have here the analysis of the source paragraph, a checklist. Use this to make sure you're doing the paragraph properly. Of all the written assignments you do in social studies, this is definitely the one that requires the most planning. And if you choose not to do it, I can't help you, right? It is your life. I can only lead you to water. I can't make you drink. Now, it says for the analysis of the source paragraph, did you start the paper in an interesting way, right? Don't just get right into it. In source or in the source, it says, right? And tell me, ease into it. Wine me a little, dine me a little, right? Let's have an appetizer before we get to the main course, right? And then, of course, your conclusion is the dessert, okay? So wine me and dine me a little. Now, start it in an interesting way. Now, the second thing I want you to be looking at here is, did you analyze the source by putting it into your own words to demonstrate your understanding? And we'll look at that when we flip to the other sources here, or the example source we're going to look at. Now, the third item to be making sure you're taking care of is, did you explore the various positions on the perspective or perspectives reflected in the source? And we'll look at that. And then the fourth check is, did you provide a clear, concise thesis statement? For example, the perspective of the source that whatever the topic is should be embraced or rejected. To what extent? Mostly, totally, not at all, right? And again, as we go through this today, we'll have a look at how to deal with that. Okay, now on your screen, man, it just doesn't stop. On your screen, we have a topic, right? A social 30 topic that you at this point in your life as a social 30-1 student should be able to handle. Now that we've talked about democracy and all these things, I figured this would be a topic that would be very manageable should I give it to you. And I think it's, as I explained it, it should be something that hopefully you're not just like, where am I? What am I doing? Okay, so let's go through the topic together, right? This is a former Government of Alberta diploma topic. I forget what year it was, but it was a while back. But anyways, so the source says it is the responsibility of individuals to hold the government accountable for its policies and actions. A government that does not reflect the will of the people must be removed from power. So there's two things that this source is looking at. Number one, the idea of holding government accountable. Well, how do we hold the governments accountable? Well, first of all, what kind of government do we have? Do we have a democracy? Well, if it's a democracy, how do we hold the government accountable? Well, in elections, if they're doing a good job and representing us, how we want them to, we vote for them again. And if they don't, we vote for someone else. That's holding people accountable. Now, if it is a dictatorship, that gets a little bit more difficult. How do we hold a tyrannical government accountable? And I would argue really the only way we can truly do that is to try to burn it to the ground. We rebel against it, much like what we saw during the American Revolution, where the colonists, right, who, I mean, they were at one point, very much before that, loyal British subjects, right? But what they decided was that King George of Great Britain was being a tyrant as far as the taxation without representation. And what happened? They chose to break free. So we have to consider that as we look at this topic. Now it says, a government that does not reflect the will of the people must be removed from power. Do you agree with that? Or do you disagree with that? Is it okay for a government to be tyrannical? Or should the people remove that government from its position, right? And in my mind, I agree, right? I 100% agree. Now, let's look at, I just made some notes and I would advise you to do this process. So number one, it says understandings from the source. So this source, guys, that we are presented with here is a political source, right? It's political in nature. It's about government. It's not really economic. I think it lends itself more to politics. In the last video, I mentioned how the sources generally either go down the road of political in nature or economic in nature. This is more political. Now, so I put down governments must reflect the will of the people, right? And that's coming right from the source, right? It doesn't specifically say that, but it's getting at the idea that government must reflect the will of the people. Now, what else does the source say? The source has a liberal perspective and it believes in limited power as we're able to change government. Did the people of the Soviet Union get to change or choose their government? Not at all. Did the people of former Nazi Germany get to choose their government? Not at all, right? Once Hitler was in power, it was a dictatorship. They had no choice. What about modern day, let's say North Korea? Did the people in that country get to choose their government, have any say in the policies or actions of that government? Absolutely not, right? They absolutely do not. So as a result, guys, this source definitely advocates for limited power. It believes in modern principles of democratic accountability. Democracy is the only form of government that allows you to hold the government accountable, right? Even before modern totalitarian governments, guys, think about like autocratic kingdoms and empires. Did the people have any say in the government? Absolutely not. The king did what the king did. The emperor did what the emperor did because they believed that it was the right thing to do. They believed that it was God's will, perhaps, right? So it believes in Locke's principle of replacing non-responsible government, right, guys? When we talked about John Locke, and he's a big deal in social theory. When we talked about John Locke, we spoke about how or how he believes that governments that do not hold the will of the people have the right to alter or abolish that government. And guys, this specifically motivated the colonists in the American 13 colonies to basically say, my chin's itchy, enough is enough to the British Crown. And this source would disagree with far left, that being communist totalitarian government, and far right, that being fascist totalitarian government. It would not support that. So knowing this, understanding that, breaking that down, what I get from this source, paraphrased, right? And again, that's a good idea. My understanding of the source is a democratic government is clearly superior to a non-democratic government because a democratic government is responsible to its people. Governments that are not responsible to the needs and wants of their people should have their power removed for the good of the people. Because guys, ultimately what we see when government isn't accountable or responsible to the people is tyranny. We see people suffer, right? And really, what do we all want? Freedom, right? We want freedom at its most basic. Now, do I agree or disagree with the source? Remember, when you get a source here in Social 30, you have to decide to what extent should we accept that source. And when I read this source, I'm like, yep, this is a situation where I 100% agree with the sentiment of the source. I believe that government should be of the people, by the people, for the people, and that tyranny must fall. And when it does, it's beautiful, right? So I 100% agree with the source. Government should be by the people, of the people, for the people. And when it's not responsible to the people, tyranny and suffering is always the result, and a tyrannical government needs to fall. That would more or less be my thesis right there, right? I could use this thesis as the driver, or this idea as the driver of my first analysis, the source paragraph, right? My first paragraph. Now, in the analysis of the source, you need to demonstrate that you understand that there might be some who agree with this and others who would disagree. So who'd agree, right? And I typed this down here. Who'd agree? I said believers in democracy, believers in small government, classical liberals like John Locke or the American forefathers would fully agree with the source. Now, who disagree? Believers in totalitarian government, people who are elitists, people who are authoritarians, people like Thomas Hobbes, people like Edmund Burke, right? People like Hitler, people like Stalin, people like Kim Jong-un. They would all disagree with the source. All right, now continuing, guys, understanding all this so far, what evidence could I use to support my position? The fact that I 100% agree with the source. And I would probably go, if I typed this out earlier, and what I would do, guys, is I would actually probably have this be my third paragraph, but I can talk about it first, and I can change the order as I'm doing it. So it says, in my analysis, I'll discuss the success of nations that observe the ideal of responsible government, responsible, accountable, same idea, right, where they're held accountable by election. So, for example, guys, Canada and the United States, right? Canada and the US are both extremely successful, stable, liberal democracies, and they have periodic elections and strong constitutions, and they ensure that governments are responsible to the will of the people. Canada is a very successful liberal democracy, as is the United States of America. And the result that we get from the fact that government is accountable and responsible to the people, I would argue, is prosperity and stability, right? When is the last time America had a revolution? Well, 1776 to found it, right? When's the last time Canada had a revolution? Never. Why? Because there's no need to. Where government responds to what the people want, the people have no need to try to bring that government down. Now, other examples I'd use to demonstrate how when accountable, responsible government is not observed, how it leads to tyranny and suffering of people. Well, I use a modern example and then a old example. And I'm using an example from the left and the right. So modern day North Korea, right? It's a state that does not follow the idea of the will of the people. And as a result, it's not responsible to them, and tyranny and economic suffering is the order of the day in North Korea. Kim Jong-un, he's unreplaceable, he's irreplaceable, and as a result, he does what he wants to benefit him, and the people in that country are extremely poor and repressed, right? And at this point in this course, if you can't talk about North Korea with some competence, then you haven't been paying attention, right? We've looked at and spoke about North Korea a lot at the beginning of the course, right? I showed you that documentary about North Korea. You should know some stuff about North Korea. Next, Nazi Germany as a nation that did not follow the will of the people. Another example, guys, of a nation that ignored back in 1933 to 1945. It didn't follow the will of the people, and ultimately, guys, it collapsed after 12 years of flawed policies, which ultimately created a war, right? Like, I mean, guys, if you in Nazi Germany did not follow the will of the government and the fact that you couldn't replace it through elections, I mean, you were branded as an enemy of the state, and right, you could be executed, you could be sent to prison, you could be sent to a labor camp. All sorts of terrible things would be your fate. So hopefully, guys, that makes sense. So I will put this source breakdown up for you in a module, maybe. Yeah, I'll put it underneath this video, and you can have a look at that if you want. If you have questions about it, please by all means send me a email and we can discuss that. Okay, with that being said, guys, here's what I want to do. I want to actually start composing an analysis of the source paragraph. So this will take a little bit of time. It's not going to be perfect, but I want you to get out what's going on here. Okay, so guys, let's do this, right? Let's do this. First of all, I'm going to full screen this for a sec here. I just want to double space this off the beginning, and that way I'll just bring this over here. There we go. I don't have to do it later. So I'm just going to move my little window over here, boom, like that. And let's get composing. So again, it is the responsibility of individuals to hold government accountable for its policies and actions. A government that does not reflect the will of the people must be removed. Okay. I said try to start your analysis of the source paragraph in an interesting way. So, you know, off the top of my head, this is what I'm thinking. People all want freedom. Freedom comes when a government is by the people, of the people, and for the people. When governments observe these tenets, they are considered to be liberal democracies. Okay, easy enough, right? Just kind of easing into it. Now, let's talk about the source. The source states that governments should ultimately be responsible and accountable to the people they rule over. This is okay, let's just keep going. Say within a democracy, this occurs with elections that are held periodically to ensure corruption is not able to remain a fact. Okay, beautiful. Now let's address the second part of that, where government is not responsible to the will of the people and lacks accountability. These governments have two fates: failure or revolution. The source advocates for small, limited government and would also believe in constitutional limits. These very ideals became the basis for the American and French revolutions, two revolutions that fundamentally changed the course of humanity and its relationship with government. In both these nations, the king was not responsible nor accountable to the people, and they were removed. In modern democracies, this removal, say they were removed through revolution and bloodshed, in modern democracies, this removal happens when elections occur and votes are tallied. The source would, actually we'll say the source disagrees with the viability of totalitarian government, both on the left and the, let's say far left, and far right sides of the political spectrum. All right. Okay, now with that being said, guys, like we've gone into some good detail here. Let's start looking at agree versus disagree, right? We've broken the source down. We've looked at the ramifications of the source. We gave a bit of history, some context, right? Things are looking good so far. Now, let's demonstrate we understand the complexity of the source itself. John Locke would agree with the sentiment of the source as he wrote in his two treatises on government. That when government becomes tyrannical, the people have the right to alter or abolish that government. Modern day believers of liberal democracies would also agree with the source and the need for the accountability of elected officials. However, people such as Thomas Hobbes would disagree and argue that government should not fall into the hands of the average citizen, and that it would produce a fundamentally flawed government. According to Hobbes, government must be under the control of the Leviathan and not the people. Let's move that down. Fix that. Okay, modern or more recently, people like, we'll say Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and Hugo Chavez would also agree with or also disagree with the source. However, I'll say, yeah, however, the common denominator of these controlled political systems is struggle, repression, and failure. A government that is not by the people, of the people, and for the people lacks the accountability needed for the people to buy into the system and support it. As a result, we should reject authoritarian government and the chaos that follows. The source should be accepted say totally accepted. We'll say the source should be accepted to the fullest extent because a government that does not reflect the will of the people creates an environment of tyranny, fear, and failure. I'm just going to put that in bold. So guys, that's my thesis. Okay, so let's look at what we did. Like I wrote that in what, 13 minutes? So yeah, I wrote that in like 13 minutes. Now, with that being said, guys, again, let's look at the breakdown of what I did here. So number one, right, I just kind of eased into it, right? The people want freedom, right? Liberal democracies, just a little bit of context, right? Just setting the stage a little bit. Now, after that, I get into what the source is saying, right? Implications of the sources. And then what happens here, right, is I talk about the implications of the sources, right? I talk about the implications and where we've seen the sources actually, like the ideas in the source be applied, right? Then John Locke, right, would agree, as would other modern day liberals, believers in liberal democracy. However, looking at the other side, Thomas Hobbes would disagree. And then I talk about other people as well. Hobbes, Hitler, Stalin, Mao, right? Chavez, whoever else, any other dictator that I could think of, right? I could put Kim Jong-un in there if I wanted to. And then at the end of that, right, I sort of get at it. A government that is not by the people, of the people, for the people, lacks accountability needed for the people to buy into the system and support it. As a result, we should reject authoritarian government and the chaos that follows. The source should be accepted to the fullest extent because a government that does not reflect the will of the people creates an environment of tyranny, fear, and failure. And I would talk about how where governments don't follow the will of the people, tyranny, fear, and failure is the result. Right? That would be the driver of my particular or of my analysis. And what evidence would I use to support that? Well, I've already touched upon it, right? Canada and America, right? How we have accountability, how we have responsibility, and how we're prosperous, stable nations. Modern day North Korea, no accountability, no responsibility, failure. Former Nazi Germany, no accountability, no responsibility, failure. Done. There's my 3 case studies. Okay. We'll look at how to actually write a analysis of the source paragraph in the next module. I apologize about that being long, but I really want to make sure that you guys get this. Hopefully you had the sense to maybe watch it at 1.25 times. And if you didn't, God bless you. God bless you. Okay. I love you guys. Peace. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have questions, make sure you ask. If you're like, Mr. Crosby, I'm not sure about this, make sure you ask. Okay. Oh, and if we go back to our checklist, right here, right? Did we start in an interesting way? Sure. Right. I think so. I mean, could have been better. I mean, if I didn't just sit there for 13 minutes and think off the top of my head, probably it could be a bit better. Did you analyze the source by putting it in your own words? Sure did. Did you explore the various points or positions on the source? Locke, Hobbes, right? Modern liberals say this, right? Believers in democracy say this, right? Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Chavez, they would say this, right? And then, did I provide a clear, concise statement on the thesis? Well, going back to it, right here, very clear what my position is, right? We should accept the source to the fullest extent. Easy peasy, not that hard. Okay, with that being said, guys, yeah, we're going to look at how to write a body paragraph next. All right. Peace, guys. Love you. Stay cool. Bye-bye.